what we're trying to do is to capture the best of the best and be able to share it with people across the country much more quickly so that they don't have to go through the process of learning on their own.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 218. Who are the drone responders, and why should we have an interest? That's the question we explore today. Charles Werner is director of the DroneResponders, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to facilitate preparedness, response, and resilience using unmanned aircraft systems operated by public safety organizations. Charles is the retired Charlottesville, Virginia fire chief, a 44-year veteran of public safety, and an FAA-certified Part 107 remote pilot. He organized and is the chair of the National Council on Public Safety UAS. He also serves on several local, state, and national committees and has authored more than 100 published articles on public safety. In 2018, he was selected as Homeland Security Person of the Year by Homeland Security Today Magazine for his work on public safety UAS. In this edition of the Drone Radio Show, Charles talks about the benefit of creating a grassroots UAS ecosystem to facilitate learning, knowledge transfer, and best practices on the use of UAS in public safety. But before we hear from Charles, I want to thank those of you who are supporting my funding campaign. Now you have the option of making a one-time donation in any amount by going to DroneRadioshow.com/donate. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. And if you'd like to make a monthly contribution, you can still go to patreon.com/DroneRadioshow. So let's find out how DroneResponders is poised to support the public safety use of drones with Charles Werner. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Charles to introduce himself.
My name is Charles Werner. I am the director of the DroneResponders Public Safety Alliance.
Charles, what is DroneResponders?
The DroneResponders Public Safety Alliance is a grassroots effort to pull agencies across the country together that are using unmanned aircraft systems or drones in public safety. And it also expands beyond that. So it's about how do we start looking at developing more standardized recommendations for training. But also we have the ability to connect with academia and help them in the development of this whole strategy with government agencies, with non-government organizations, with the UAS industry and businesses, because all of this is really part of the ecosystem that we're working under.
Why was it created?
The reason it got started was because we've got so many agencies now that are really coming into light and understanding that drones really make a huge difference. In my presentations across the country, I often ask the question before I go into the use cases, would you ever put any of your personnel or your citizens in harm's way unnecessarily by not knowing of hazards that exist? And I ask people to hold that thought. And I'll go through about 25 use cases. At the end of that, there's almost a unanimous agreement that not having a drone in a lot of these specific incidents, there's a lot of things that go unnoticed or unknown that are actually hazardous to the firefighters, to the police officers, to the searchers that they didn't know about. So it's really a rationalization of that. Well, now that everybody's starting to get that understanding, everybody's kind of starting over. There's no one place to find everything that you're looking for. So we want to create a portal, a place for the policies, the procedures, best practices, the lessons learned, training programs, even maybe links to stories of successes, and then, eventually down the road that maybe we have a way to make entries in for missions. What mission did you have? Was it successful? If it was, what made it successful? If it wasn't, what kept it from being successful? And just really trying to put this vast information together. But then as we go through and start learning these operations and we learn some gaps that we find, that we'd say, if we had something of a payload that was like this, or something different, that we can also have conversations with industry. But now we have a collective voice of being able to capture this information and being an influence to industry, for example.
With your long history in public safety, Was the organization modeled after something that you've seen before?
It's kind of a culmination of a lot of different things that I've seen. I've worked with the International Association of Fire Chiefs. I helped to start the technology council there. So it's kind of that, a little bit of saying, how do we advance this technology more quickly? It's also got some of the International Public Safety Association work in it, where we're saying, how do we do this collectively multidiscipline kind of approach? It's got some of the NIPSTIC, National Public Safety Telecommunications Council, of saying, how do we bring people together to start sharing information? So it's a culmination of a lot of my experiences that pull into bringing the best of the best.
Who are some of the stakeholders that are involved in the organization?
This is a nonprofit working under the Airborne International Response Team. So we actually work under the umbrella of a nonprofit. What that gives us the advantage of is to get sponsors so that we can raise money that helps us create those portals and the place that we can put information that people can go to and access. So Chris Todd with AIRT is one of the people that is kind of helped leading the charge on this, being supportive of us making this maneuver. But we have people from across the country that are on board to move forward as a board of advisors, everywhere from representatives from LA City, New York City, Miami Beach, Chicago, just lots of different places, and there's just too many to name.
Is DroneResponders primarily oriented to the public sector UAS, or is it broader?
Well, I think it can be anybody that's in public safety, but our approach is to reach out and do partnerships with all of those different areas that we talked about. So academia, government agencies, local, state, federal, non-government organizations like the Red Cross, International Fire Chiefs and others, the National Association of Chiefs of Police, emergency managers, and then as well as academia that we mentioned, and then industry and business. So it's kind of like who has what to offer to move this in the direction to advance public safety in aircraft systems.
How do you plan on achieving the organization's mission?
What we're looking to do is a kind of a three-tiered approach. The first one is awareness. So that might be the panel or the lecture. The second one is a camp. And that's where you come and you actually learn a capability or a technical specialty that you didn't have before. So now you maybe know how to use a drone in a hazmat situation, or you know how to do traffic crash reconstruction, or you know how to do disaster assessment mapping. And then the third tier is actually doing exercises to test that knowledge you've learned in an application to see how it worked and what else needs to be done to make it work more effectively.
You mentioned standards for UAS. How important is it that there be some sort of standard approach for UAS in public safety?
So most organizations, be it law enforcement, fire department, EMS, emergency management, we all have typically standards that we use as references. So in the fire service, we use the National Fire Protection Association. They came out with NFPA 2400, which is the Public Safety UAS committee to work on that, and created a standard that says if you're going to have a program, this is what it needs to have in it. Now, the next step is how do we add to that and to other standards that exist to say, now, when we have the basic training course, what does that look like? Because what's happening is that we're being approached by a lot of different agencies that are saying, hey, we can train you. What does that mean? And so you're testing the waters of finding out what they've done, who they've done it with, what experiences have they had, but there's no standardization that says this is the criteria that we're going to meet. And when you're done, you will have satisfied a requirement.
Are you involving organizations that currently provide UAS training?
So we've reached out and we're having conversations with all of them as we go forward to identify what currently do you have as a program so that we can look at these across the board and then come up with the best of each of these and what's also realistic in a time frame. But the standard of just one class, the base foundation, is just the beginning, because now we have specialties. So if you're going to do traffic crash reconstruction, or you're going to do damage assessment processing and those kind of things, that they would be, imagine them being as an endorsement. So if you're flying an aircraft, you get your basic flight license, and then you have endorsements to fly different types of aircraft. And it would be the same kind of thing in this, is that if you have a specialty, you would do those endorsements to add on to that base. But that's this whole building block process.
Public safety use of drones is really growing and is constantly evolving. How do you go about creating a framework that not only brings everything together under a common umbrella, but that it's manageable and makes sense?
We're actually trying to find people that have actual specialties or expertise in a specific area. For example, I would use an example of Battalion Chief Chris Gould at the Southern Manatee Fire and Rescue in Florida. He and his team have done a great deal of work with hazmat. So it's to get people like him and others that know him to work on developing that further. So we would have different types of work groups. So in essence, we're taking this thing out. It's kind of like how you eat an elephant. It's one bite at a time. It's that same kind of process. So we look at a base training. We work on that with a group of people. We work on specialty of hazmat. We might look at disaster mapping and have groups working on the development of this back to a consensus overall.
How can people get involved with drone responders?
First step would be go to DroneResponders.org, and there's a join process there. You just click on it, go in and join. It's free. There is no cost. And then what we're going to do from that is we're going to poll people as to particular interest they might have or expertise they have in a particular area. Or if there's somebody that's working on something really significant now, they can email me at charles@DroneResponders.org.
How will drone responders coordinate with the National Council on Public Safety UAS?
Our goal is to coordinate back and forth with them so that the National Council becomes a way of providing information back out to the other national organizations that are part of that organization. So this is focused on grassroots. The National Council is focused at a higher level back to the organizations themselves.
And as a grassroots organization, I imagine you have a lot of people who might be out in the field and having direct input into the use of drones.
That's correct. We're looking for the people that are out there that are either leading UAS teams or that are on UAS teams, and they want to be a part of moving this forward to say, let's really make something happen in the space.
Have you guys developed a strategic plan?
We're actually in the stages of that now, and this is going to be utilizing a number of these impressive advisors that we have from across the country to say, let's kind of map this out of what we want this to look like and kind of create a tiered approach as to how we go about doing it. Because some of this stuff is going to be happening in parallel. For example, maybe looking at the base standard for the entry level training for remote pilot for public safety while we're working on expertise areas in hazmat and disaster mapping and so on.
What are some of the use cases that come to mind when you're talking about public safety UAS?
It's really about situational awareness. So when we've had these large floods, what we've seen that drones are able to do for a lot of people is to provide that situational awareness in real-time video streaming from the areas that are being devastated. And a lot of times we've had flooding in places that we've never had flooding before. And the drones give us that quick look of telling us how bad is bad. The other part is looking for lost persons. If we have people that are out in certain areas in large fields, we can do a search with either the visual camera itself or flip over to thermal image and be able to look to see if there's somebody in this large area and cover it very quickly. And the same thing is true if you live in an area that's alongside the ocean and cliffs. You can actually search those areas where you couldn't necessarily search on the ground. From a law enforcement perspective, it's a huge advantage. We've seen numerous situations where an Overwatch pre-entry has shown what happens when the law enforcement officers make entry. And what happens is people come out windows, they throw guns on a roof and drugs in the bushes. All this is captured by thermal image. And we'll see people run out the back to a different area and change their shirt from one color to another. And they're able to capture these people and everything's been captured. Another good example is in Chula Vista, California. There's a company called CAPE that's worked with Chula Vista to create what they call drone as a responder, as a first responder. They call it the DFR program. It launches automatically from the dispatch of a call and flies to the incident, to the law enforcement incident. And on average, it's there within 115 seconds. It's resulted in, I think, 50 some arrests. It's canceled 47 responses from ground units and put those units back in service because they weren't needed. And that's being flown as part of the FAA Integration Pilot Project, where they're able to fly beyond visual line of sight.
Any other examples?
There was a use case in Florida where they had a suspect who was hiding in the Everglades on a little bit of an island, and they were looking with their thermal image view, and they could see that this guy happened to be surrounded by 4 alligators descending on this individual, and they were able to tell him, you have one of 2 choices. You can stay where you are, and you will soon be accompanied by 4 alligators, or you can be with us. And in 15 seconds, he was in custody. The use case is over Lincolnshire in Europe, where the Lincolnshire police have seen numerous poachers that thought they were operating safely. And at night, they were able to use the thermal image FLIR and identify where the poachers were and actually go and arrest them. I think we're seeing lifeguards. So you might have 2 stands, one close to the other, and the first one will do the same normal thing it does if there's a person in trouble. They'll run to the swimmer. At the same time, the other stand or the lifeguard stand is launching a drone with a flotation device. And generally, in seconds, the drone has dropped the flotation device right to the person in the water, even before the rescue swimmer gets close. I think there are so many stories that we've seen of how drones are starting to save lives that it's transformational. And so this is just kind of showing where things are headed. And what we've seen across the country is that drones in public safety, once they've started having successful missions, have gone from being nice to have to need to have.
What sort of response are you getting from around the country?
As soon as people hear about it, we get jumps. So each time we have one of these kind of outreaches where people hear it, we have an increase, a spike that goes up because people want to be a part of moving this forward. We all seem to have kind of the same passion for this, and we all want to help each other figure it out.
From your perspective, what are the things that have to happen now to successfully grow drone responders?
Well, one, I need to get people involved. So I need to have people sign up and join so that we can find out who has certain expertise or knowledge and who wants to work on certain things. Certainly from the businesses industry out there, we could use sponsors so that we have some money that can go into building some of the infrastructure that this can be built on. We have a couple sponsors already, and we have others that are very close to coming on board. And I think that everybody sees that if we can do something to raise this tide, or in this case, maybe increase the wind, we kind of lift everybody's drone a little bit higher as we go forward.
What are the key things that the audience should know now?
Well, I think the important thing for people to know is that there's a lot of people in similar situations and they're trying to learn. And what we're trying to do is to capture the best of the best and be able to share it with people across the country much more quickly so that they don't have to go through the process of learning on their own. And right now, that's kind of been the repeat process. And what we want our people to know is we're going to create a resource that you can come to, a one-stop shop, and be able to find the solutions that you're looking for, the policies, the procedures, basically anything that you're looking for, hopefully you'll find at DroneResponders.
I think everyone agrees that getting the right information is critical. But in the public safety arena, there's really more to it. Can you talk about what happens when we don't have access to the right information in a public safety environment?
If we don't have the right information, it means we could be flying in the wrong place. We could be flying the wrong type of aircraft for the mission that's being flown, or we may not know about some other types of payloads that could help us move our effort forward, or that we can take advantage of the expertise from Southern Manatee, Florida on hazmat. So that's the idea, is that number one, as I mentioned to you before, I might get hit by 10 people that say we can train you. And I'm saying, okay, what is that training based on? And now it's just kind of a trial and error, and you're listening to what their experiences were. What we hope to do is to be able to start formalizing some of this stuff in a way that we say, that's a base curriculum. That's what it means to be an instructor in this field, and those kind of ideas.
So what are the next steps?
Right. And in many cases, they can be very different in what they're teaching. And we also are looking at, so the NIST has a UAS obstacle course they built, and we're looking at that now to say, let's figure out how do we make this in what will work for public safety that can be mobile, that gives us a way to do a test or several tests that say, this is the task you have to do, and you have to do it within a certain amount of time and with a certain amount of accuracy, so that we all now have this idea of what do we have to accomplish to show our proficiency and our credibility to fly.
Is there anything that we missed that we should talk about?
I think one of the important things that I want to make sure that I get out here is that DroneResponders is not trying to take over the world. It's not trying to take over the drone space. It's trying to partner with all the people that are out there doing things already. So we don't want to become the only organization that anybody works with. We want to work with organizations like the Airborne Public Safety Association, the other national organizations that are out there to say, what are you doing? Can we promote what each other are doing so that we keep moving this forward?
From your perspective, what's the big lesson on the use of drones in public safety?
Well, I think what we've seen so far is the more that we can learn from what others have learned, either through the best practices of success or the lessons learned so we avoid making those same mistakes, we can advance the space much more quickly than doing it individually by ourselves.
Charles, you're the chair of the National Council on Public Safety UAS, and now you're leading the formation of DroneResponders. Where does your motivation come from?
Well, I've been in technology throughout my career in public safety, and just as I was retiring as a fire chief, I realized the value that drones could bring to public safety in situational awareness and in so many different ways. And I think my first article was about 7 use cases. And as I mentioned to you, I think we're up to 30.
What was it that captured your attention on the use of drones in public safety?
I'm always looking at technology, not for technology's sake, but saying, what can that bring to it? And I became a hobbyist first. And I went out and flew it and said, okay, let me fly this and see how easy is it? How difficult is it? What's the application or utility in these different types of situations? But I think the one thing that really got my attention the most was when I was able to go back from a visual view to a thermal image view and be able to see kind of different characteristics of each. So if I could see firefighters on a roof when they're doing a firefighting operation and the heat signature in a building at the same time, that became a very compelling way of saying, get the people off the roof, or just to be able to monitor their activity to make sure that they were okay in those positions they were in. And then imagine the same thing at night is you're out doing a search, and now you can flip for your normal view because you can't see much in the dark to a thermal image, and now you can start seeing people, animals, all kinds of things that are moving around in an open field. So to me, it just showed that it was a way we could much more quickly be able to identify issues that we couldn't see from the ground.
And for my final question, Charles, what message would you like to leave listeners regarding the drone responders and its overall mission and impact in public safety?
Well, I think the first message I would say is that drones have and will continue to save lives, but drone responders will be working hard to make it better and easier for us to do this, to save more lives more quickly together.
That's it for episode 218 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Charles Werner and learning about drone responders. I want to thank Charles for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about drone responders or want to connect with Charles, check out the webpage at DroneResponders.org. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to DroneRadioshow.com/donate or Patreon.com/DroneRadioshow. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.